Good morning, welcome. We're back at Laughing Water Studio. This is lesson number 2 for our spring couplet and our spring landscape. Last time you were here, we worked on the 4 characters for a spring couplet. Let me finish up here. And we did both in a traditional Lee style and a little more artistically. Today we're going to do it in the artistically again, but this time much smaller, getting ready for when we'll be ready to inscribe our landscape from last week, and that was the willow landscape. We last time worked on the host tree, the 2 guest trees. Today we'll work on some water under the trees, some distant islands, and some very faint small willow trees in the distance. But we will also think about, where do we inscribe it? How do you best inscribe a Chinese painting? A painting like this isn't considered complete until there is some inscription and perhaps date and name of the painter. So we'll come back to that and talk about what some of our options will be. So we'll start with the spring couplet. We're going to do it small, and I'd say each character is about maybe ½ inch in size. And I'm going to use today my detail brush, small brush, wolf hair, get it a little bit wet, and then fix my point, get my hairs in a row, get rid of some of that excess liquid, use a little bit of tissue to wick some of that off, pick up some ink, and then mix it into the brush. Do a little bit of bouncing just to see how well did I do that, and then I'll also use my test sheet to be sure I have it at the consistency I want to have it at. I'm going to still take out a little more out of this because these characters will be small. My advice to you at home, if you're doing this, is to fully load your brush and then go get a cup of tea, make a cup of tea, let it steep, then come back and reset it again. It'll give some time for some of the excess liquid to evaporate and for you to get a little better control of your brush. So we have these 4 characters, literally spring, daybreak, foggy willow tree, which is telling us that at daybreak in spring through the fog you can see the willow tree. We're going to do it in artistically, so we'll start with the character for spring. We're starting quite small. We'll start with that simple first horizontal, which is a little upward lift to it, but I'm still doing all of my traditional Lee style strokes, back, forth, back again. Long horizontal, and then a vertical to connect them. After that, I do my down to left, down to right, and I go down to left. Down to right is a wave stroke. I press and I lift off. Come back and refix my ink and reset my point. Under that, we'll do the sun radical, left horizontal, or left vertical, horizontal connects to vertical, horizontal, horizontal, and I have my complete character for spring. Second character is a character for daybreak. I start on the left side with the sun radical again, this time a little more vertically condensed, since it's behaving as a radical in this case. Then long horizontal, short horizontal, connect them with a vertical. Again, long, short horizontals, connect them with the vertical. Long, short horizontals, connect with the vertical. Under that, a nice thin horizontal line, and then my down to left, which is more like a dot, and down to right, which is again my wave stroke. And so now I have spring and daybreak, the first half of my couplet. Then I'm going to do the character for smoky or foggy. Starts with the fire radical, and I'm wanting to try to keep these characters similar in size, similar in spacing. I did the two dots, pair of dots first, then strung that down to left through it, and then down to right comes out of the down to left. On the right side, we start with a nice long horizontal, build a very narrow box, and then draw a pair of vertical dots through it. Under that, another horizontal, and then our wave stroke. So down to left, press, lift, press, lift. Get a strong wave stroke there. It picks up the rhythm from the wave strokes in the characters above. Pick up a little more ink. Again, reset my brush, remix my ink. It's important to indulge the brush. Stay 2 steps ahead of it, and you won't be having as many extremes of too wet or too dry on your brush. So our last character is our focus character, which is the character for willow. We start with the wood or tree radical with a horizontal, long, strong, vertical, very thin down to left, down to right. Think of these as being those willow whips, a nice slender thread. On the right side, these structures that start with vertical to horizontal, horizontal to vertical, vertical, horizontal to vertical, horizontal, and we have our 4 characters. Now, if we were thinking about putting those on a painting, I get my painting out here, I might put them at the top right. I might put it at the top left. At this point, I'm not sure which one it'll be because I want to see what happens with my distant trees and landforms before I make that decision. But what I can do is I can practice my date and name and add that to this inscription. So one can do an inscription. If one has the space, one could after that do today's date and your name, or you could stack it in columns with inscription, date, and name, and that's what I'll demonstrate right now. Get a little more ink here. So if I'm doing an inscription where I'm doing couplet, date, name, when I start the second column, I indent a bit. I don't keep them all at the same height, but I bring it down just a little bit. It's another form of sort of host and guest. This is the host, this is the main piece of information. Secondary is the date, and then third is my name. So the date today is March 28th, I think. So I'll start with 2, 0, another 2, another 0. So that gives me 2020, which is 2020. After that, I put the character for year, starting with a down to left dot, then my first horizontal, my second horizontal, my second down to left dot, my third horizontal, and then a strong vertical coming through. So I have my year done. We are still in the 3rd month, so we start with character for 3, 1 horizontal, 2, and a wave, and then our character for month. And then today is the 28th, so I start with character for 2 and character for 10. gives me 20, and then add the character for 8, down to left, down to right, and then my character for day or sun. And then we have a complete date. Lastly, I will add a name, my own in this case. And so start here with this down to left, down to right, and then second character. And there we have a complete inscription to add to our painting. Now, as we transition to doing our landscape, I want to talk a little bit about why do we do this? Why do we work with these ancient materials? Why do we study the traditions of, in my case, Chinese painting? One is, and I find this true, that I have students who come for many different reasons. Some just have a passion about things Asian or Chinese or Japanese or Korean. Some have always just wanted to learn how to use the brush. Some have little interest in any of that, but just like the enjoyment of coming once a week and sitting in a calm space and practicing the discipline of using these materials. There's also a mental health reason, which is that this is not easy. I make it look easy, but it's not easy. And because of that, you have to concentrate. You have to single task. And we're being given more opportunity to single task with this whole need for social distancing at this point in time, to sit and do one thing at a time. And we're not very good at that. So here's an opportunity to close the door, be in a room, and just focus on doing this one thing. Why do I do it? All of those reasons. And for me, it creates a connection to particularly the Chinese culture, particularly to all of those thousands of painters who have done this before me. And that I find as a richness, as an assurance, and as an inspiration. And so I offer that to you to think about why are we doing this? It's an amazing tradition. The materials, although ancient, are extraordinary, and it is a way to feel a connection to something that is much broader and longer and ancient than who we are right now in America. Part of my understanding of Chinese history is it wasn't a happy story a lot of the times, and that some of these most beautiful works that we now admire were done in very, very difficult times, in very, very difficult conditions. And so I can take solace in that and say, okay, I can do that. I can continue to practice this and maintain some measure of calm in this otherwise chaotic time that we find ourselves in. So that's Bob's sermon for the day, and now we'll move on to our landscape. So if you have your model at hand of the landscape painting, at the base there, if you look very carefully, there are some curving water lines and some smoother as you go out. First thing I want to do before we get into doing those water lines and doing our distance is give a little demo on how to create 3 tones of wash, because we will need 3 tones. So I'm just taking 3 small dishes, putting a good teaspoon of water in, or 2 in each one. Then I'm going to take my brush I had used previously for ink work. You could use your calligraphy brush as well. And I'm going to put it in the first bowl and just wash it out. I just want to thoroughly wash out that brush. Wick off the excess. Go to my second bowl. Continue to wash it off. And really get a lot of what's in the base of that brush. Wick it off. And then my third bowl. Now, if this has worked as is my intention, if I go back to my first bowl, I should get a dark gray. I'll wipe my brush clean, go to the second bowl, and I get a lighter gray. Wipe my brush, go to the third, and I get the lightest gray. And so I ended up making dark gray, medium gray, light gray. That at least gives me a baseline for knowing what tone of ink is in my brush. In time, after you've done this, as long as some of our teachers have done it, you don't need this as a crutch, but if you want to get a little more specific about what's in your brush, this is one way of doing that. So I'm going to start down at the bottom here. See if I can get this closer to the screen. And I'm going to take my middle gray and load it into my brush. First, I want to get some of that ink out of there. And let's see what we have. Okay, so I have a middle gray in here, and I'm going to start in front with sort of lazy S lines, just to get some water going. Now, of course, I am left-handed, and so I am doing it the way, in the direction that works for someone left-handed. If you are right-handed, you may find it easier to go in the other direction. But I'm starting at the base. I'm starting with, these are very thin lines, and I'm wanting to get some rhythm to them. Coming off from the right, moving to the left. And up front, they have a little more wiggle to them. As they get farther back, they get flatter. And as they go under this tree over here, they get flatter still. Maybe a few small movements, but really getting smaller and smaller until we go out here. And I might want to move to my lightest gray. As I go farther out, my strokes may get shorter, farther apart. Again, trying to avoid anything that's too much of a pattern, but just going off into the distance. And let me hold that up just so you can see what I've done. So we started on the right side, a little bit of movement, spreading out, flattening out, spacing out, and then these were even lighter and they're just drifting out to the distance. So that's my foreground detail. Now I'm going to do the background detail, which will be going back to my landscape brush, loading some of these middle tone and lighter tone grays in it and doing these landforms. Then I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 small willows in the distance. These have no structure, no trunks or branches. They are just the willow whips. They're at such a distance you can't see the structure, so they're just long hairs coming out in both directions. So let's see how that works. So I'll go back to my landscape brush. I want to work fairly light, and fairly wet and fairly quick strokes. So I'm going to do this. Let's move this so we can see. So just some almost amorphic shapes, nothing too big. Some of them can be connected. I can go tip to water and get lighter and lighter ones, and even lighter still, maybe at the top of the page. So it goes back. So we'll let that dry for the moment before we do our distant willows. But as we're waiting for those to dry, we can look at our inscription and try and get a sense of where we would want to put that. My own feeling is I might put it up here, but put my name under the date, and so I have the inscription here and the date and name running here, and that opens this up. Let's see how we're doing. It's getting dry. Almost there. One other thing I forgot to mention last time and forgot to do on this model was the dots. And the dots done traditionally should be done while the trunk is still wet. They're wet dots and come up the trunks and some of the branches. What are dots? Dots are a hard thing to give a specific definition to. In this case, they could be growths on the trunk, they could be scars or broken branches. What their function is to add energy points. They can be used to fix a structure that might be weak or to draw the eye through the painting, but they're very much function as a way to enliven the painting and bring more life and vibrancy to it. So let's see how we're doing here with up here. So I'm going to go back to my small detail brush. I'm going to demonstrate the structure of these very large so that you can get a sense of what is going on when I make it small. I'm working very light, but what I'm going to do for these structures is just start making little arcs. Thinking again, I'm doing these in groups, so they may have this sort of effervescent feeling to them. Some of these can be longer. They're mostly fairly straight lines. They're not going in and out. They're just, if you think of what a overgrown willow tree looks like at a distance, this is the effect you're going to. So you're just making these a couple of groups of these willow wisps. Here's one, a smaller one in the distance. And let's put one over here. And again, I'm doing these oversized. We'll make them much smaller, but they're just to add a little more detail. So from across the room, you're drawn into the painting by the host and guest willow trees. As you get up closer, you then see the water, and then closer even still, you would see the distant landforms and the willow trees. So let's do a few of these. So I'll put two groups of them over here. So one, and a second one back here. And then over here, just separate a little bit, but really quite small, just almost barely visible. Again, we're looking through the fog, through the smoke in the morning. Light is dim, so it's almost no structure there. Just a few beyond here that maybe don't even go all the way down to the ground. You're just seeing the peaks because of the fog. And then another major one over here. These can be a little longer, a little more evident. That would be our complete distance. So I started with 1, 2, one over to the side a little smaller, some distant ones, and then a major one over here. So I'm thinking still in host and guest, in groups, things that are gathered, things that are scattered. So that's my complete painting. Now I'm going to inscribe it. So, because I was thinking just a little bit ahead, I left, another way, enough space here so I could put my inscription up there. Now I'm going to switch my ink and my detail brush to straight up ink, full value of black. Okay. Roll our sleeves up because we're getting serious. Stabilize our paper. Get our model out. So, let's see. So I will start up here with my spring character, down to left, down to right, my sun radical. Then my character for daybreak, or dawn, and this long horizontal, short horizontal, vertical. These sort of look like geese or mallards that are landing. Another horizontal, down to left is a dot, down to right is a wave. Then my character for daybreak, or foggy, sorry, this was daybreak. Then horizontal, build, a small box, close it, pair of verticals, another horizontal, and then a nice strong wave stroke and vertical to connect. And then lastly is my character for willow, starting with tree radical, horizontal, vertical, thin down to left, down to right. And we're doing some variations of thick and thin as we do this. Thick being more pressing. So I have my inscription that in spring at daybreak we see the willows through the fog. Then I want to add my date and name, which I will put here, 20, 20, and year, horizontal, horizontal, down to left dot, horizontal. And I'm just going to put third month so that my inscription does not invade into the trees down here. So there's just a little bit of breathing space there. And then to the left of that, my name, which I'll also do just a little bit smaller. And there I have a complete piece. So I have my host tree, two guest trees, distant landforms, distant willows, my inscription. In spring at daybreak we see the willows in the fog, the date and name, and now I have a complete landscape. So that's it for today. Practice it, and these videos, as I said last time, will be posted on my YouTube channel, Laughing Water Studio channel, and they will remain there so that if you miss one or want to go back and start again, they are there. And if you're a student of mine, I've already sent you the models for last week. I'll continue to send you models when I do this again next week. And for those of you who aren't my students, if you want to drop me an email, I can certainly send you the models, but feel free to use these lessons during this time, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.